Donald Trump was ruthlessly dismantled on global television, and the conservative internet completely collapsed in real time. The biggest night in Hollywood transformed instantly into an inescapable public nightmare for the former president and the Make America Great Again movement. Millions of viewers tuned in expecting glamorous red carpets and golden statues, but instead, they witnessed a brutal, unfiltered takedown orchestrated by two of the most prominent comedians in television history. Conan and Appos, Brian and Jimmy Kimmel showed absolutely no mercy. They weaponized the prestigious Academy Award stage, turning it into a relentless roasting floor that directly targeted the fragile ego, the legal controversies, and the constant media circus surrounding Donald Trump. The digital backlash was instantaneous and explosive. Across every major social media platform, loyal supporters erupted in pure outrage. Prominent conservative voices scrambled frantically to defend their political leader, firing off furious posts and launching massive defensive campaigns while the rest of the world simply watched and laughed. Conan and Appos, Brian had previously promised the public that he would keep the award ceremony completely clean and avoid any political landmines. That empty promise shattered within the first 90 seconds of his opening monologue. He went straight for the most sensitive and damaging topics, relentlessly mocking the former president and Appos' controversial associates, his bizarre late-night internet habits, and his desperate need to stamp his own name on every single historic building in the nation. Jimmy Kimmel later threw actual gasoline on the raging fire by taking direct, brutal aim at the former First Lady and her highly criticized media projects. The carefully crafted tough image of the political right was completely shattered by a room full of international celebrities and a massive global audience. The mockery was surgical, highly publicized, and completely impossible to ignore. The absolute fury radiating from the conservative camp only amplified the devastating impact of the live broadcast, proving exactly how deep the comedians managed to strike. Hello and welcome to United States News Daily. I am your host, bringing you the unvarnished truth behind the most intense political and cultural clashes happening right now. We strip away the spin and deliver the deep analysis you deserve. If you appreciate honest, straightforward coverage that never backs down from the truth, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you never miss our daily updates. Now, we must examine exactly how this historic television moment unfolded. The digital battlefield ignited over a profoundly absurd dispute that somehow dragged the highest echelons of political power into the gutter. The catalyst was not a debate over foreign policy or economic theory, but a vicious, highly personal online shouting match between two heavyweights of conservative media. Mark Levin launched a blistering attack against Megyn Kelly, branding her with a barrage of derogatory insults regarding her emotional stability and professionalism. Megyn Kelly, refusing to back down, retaliated with a hyper-specific and deeply humiliating insult targeting Mark Levin and his physical anatomy. She publicly suggested that his aggressive behavior stemmed from a severe anatomical shortcoming, dropping the phrase micro-penis onto the public timeline for millions to see. The sheer audacity of a prominent news anchor utilizing such a juvenile yet devastatingly effective biological insult immediately fractured the conservative internet. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated chaos that ordinarily would have burned out within a few news cycles. The situation, however, mutated into a monumental political spectacle the exact second the former president of the United States decided to personally intervene. Instead of ignoring the petty squabble, Donald Trump utilized his proprietary social media platform to issue a forceful, official defense of Mark Levin. The visual of a man who once held the highest office in the nation drafting a passionate paragraph to shield a radio host from a joke about his genitalia completely shattered any remaining illusion of dignified political discourse. The former president declared Levin a great patriot who was under siege by individuals of lesser intellect. He essentially drew a line in the sand, demanding loyalty, and framing the anatomical insult against his ally as an attack on the entire Make America Great Again movement. This bizarre strategic choice only poured immense volumes of fuel onto the fire. By attempting to extinguish the mockery, he amplified it exponentially, forcing international news outlets to cover a story centered entirely around male inadequacy. This unprecedented presidential defense mechanism makes absolute, perfect sense when viewed through the lens of recent late-night television history. The hypersensitivity surrounding physical characteristics is a well-documented vulnerability for the former commander-in-chief. To fully grasp the sheer panic behind his social media post, one must rewind to a deeply uncomfortable broadcast featuring Jimmy Kimmel and adult film actress Stormy Daniels. During that highly publicized interview, Kimmel presented the actress with a physical lineup of orange mushrooms, asking her to identify which one most accurately represented the former president. She made her selection on national television, branding him with an inescapable, highly specific visual association that went viral globally. That singular moment of late-night humiliation clearly left a lasting, psychological scar. When Megyn Kelly deployed a nearly identical insult against one of his most loyal media surrogates, it evidently triggered a massive defensive response. The former president was not merely defending Mark Levin, he was aggressively trying to rewrite the narrative surrounding his own lingering insecurities. The ghost of that late-night comedy segment haunted his every keystroke. The collateral damage from this bizarre defense strategy rippled violently through his own political base. The attempt to demand respect completely backfired, leaving loyal supporters totally bewildered by the priorities of their leader. The confusion reached a fever pitch when prominent political figures within the movement began contradicting each other on the public stage. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, an incredibly vocal and usually fiercely loyal ally, inexplicably added to the chaos by amplifying the very same insults against Mark Levin. The internal conservative ecosystem morphed into a circular firing squad. Supporters were left staring at their screens, trying to comprehend why the central focus of their political revolution had suddenly shifted to defending the physical attributes of a talk radio host. The intense devotion usually reserved for massive political rallies was now being wasted on a deeply embarrassing internet feud. The movement that built its entire brand on projecting overwhelming strength and dominant alpha male energy was suddenly bogged down in a frantic, desperate effort to prove they were not physically inadequate. The entire saga highlighted a critical vulnerability that comedians and critics have masterfully learned to exploit. They realized that logical arguments and policy debates often fail to pierce the armor of modern political populism. However, attacking the core vanity and challenging the masculine facade of these figures yields instantaneous, spectacular results. The absolute meltdown triggered by a few carefully chosen words about biology proved that the most powerful figures in the conservative movement possess incredibly fragile egos. The late-night hosts sitting in Hollywood recognized this golden opportunity. They watched the former president unravel over a trivial social media insult and realized they possessed the exact blueprint to dismantle his public persona. By treating him not as a terrifying political mastermind, but as a deeply insecure, easily provoked individual, they stripped away his power. The laughter echoing from the theater audience was not just entertainment. It was a highly targeted, strategic strike against a political machine that completely short-circuits the moment it becomes the butt of the joke. This absurd chapter of internet history perfectly set the stage for the absolute devastation that was about to unfold on the grandest stage in the entertainment industry. The physical insecurity morphed seamlessly into a desperate hunger for historical permanence. Conan O. and Appos, Brian recognized this insatiable appetite for validation and weaponized it beautifully on the global stage. He did not even need to utter a specific name during his monologue. By casually welcoming the international audience to a newly rebranded, highly insulting theater moniker, he struck the exact nerve controlling the former president and his fragile legacy complex. The comedian declared they were broadcasting live from a venue named after a very specific anatomical shortcoming. The audience erupted because everyone instantly knew exactly who was frantically attempting to buy his way into American architectural history. There is currently only one political figure in the United States frantically slapping his surname onto every single piece of federal real estate in sight. The obsession goes far beyond mere vanity. It is an aggressive campaign to rewrite reality through sheer repetition. The United States Institute of Peace mysteriously transformed into the Donald J. Trump United States Institute of Peace. The prestigious Kennedy Center suffered a similar, terrifying fate. It was not merely rebranded. The moment he returned to power, he immediately installed himself as the absolute chairman of the board. The artistic community reacted with lightning speed. Performers pulled out in droves. Global symphony orchestras and theatrical productions outright refused to associate their art with his political brand. Ticket sales evaporated overnight. The cultural hub of the nation became an echoing ghost town simply because everything that specific brand touches inevitably withers and dies under the weight of his ego. To mask this catastrophic cultural and financial failure, massive taxpayer-funded renovations were suddenly announced to the public. The historic building will be completely shuttered for 2 entire years. The official justification for this massive closure involves completely fabricated architectural necessities, including the unbelievably ridiculous installation of solid marble armrests inside the theater. The sheer absurdity of utilizing public funds for imperial style, physically uncomfortable seating perfectly encapsulates the aesthetic of the entire administration. It prioritizes cold, hard opulence over actual human comfort or functionality. Meanwhile, The loyalists who allegedly fixed the failing institution are currently crashing out in public after being unceremoniously fired from their leadership roles. The desperation to project monumental success while actively managing a spectacular collapse is entirely palpable to anyone watching. The geographical vanity project extends far beyond cultural centers and theater seats. Bizarre demands were allegedly made behind closed doors to rename major national transit hubs, specifically Dulles Airport and Penn Station, in direct exchange for the release of critical federal funding. Holding vital public infrastructure hostage for a literal nameplate on a building is a masterclass in narcissistic negotiation tactics. When the public backlash to this monumental ego trip grew too intense for his administration to handle, the narrative abruptly shifted in a highly predictable manner. A frantic late-night post appeared on his proprietary social platform, completely denying the massive extortion scheme. He aggressively claimed the idea to rename the massive transportation hubs originated entirely from certain unnamed politicians and construction union leaders, and absolutely not from him. History, however, tells a vastly different and much more entertaining story. The American public remembers his long, documented history of employing fake publicists. He spent decades utilizing aliases to phone reporters and plant flattering stories about his own wealth and romantic conquests in local tabloids. It is incredibly easy to deduce that one of those mysterious union heads demanding a newly named train station probably shared a striking resemblance to a man named John Barron, his favorite historical pseudonym. The visual reality of this situation is genuinely pathetic. A man possessing unparalleled political power is currently behaving exactly like a petulant child, demanding his name be etched into the playground equipment. He is actively attempting to fabricate a lasting historical legacy using the exact same aggressive, hollow branding strategies that led his countless corporate ventures straight into financial bankruptcy. He is reportedly spending $400 million to construct a grand ballroom significantly larger than the White House itself. Furthermore, he possesses actual architectural plans to build an absurd monument in the Capitol named the Arc to Trump. Yet, despite this overwhelming evidence of extreme megalomania, he desperately wants the voting public to believe that slapping his name on a public train station was simply someone else proposing a nice idea. Conan and Apos, Brian understood that the ultimate weapon against a man utterly obsessed with his own manufactured reflection is simply holding up a mirror, pointing at the cracks, and laughing loudly at the distorted, insecure image looking back. The atmosphere in the room completely shifted when the monologue pivoted away from vanity projects and directly into the darkest corners of international justice. The comedic mask slipped entirely, revealing a razor-sharp critique of a deeply broken legal system. The transition was brutal and necessary. A poignant observation was made regarding the glaring absence of British talent in the leading acting categories for the first time in over a decade. But this was not merely a critique of the film industry. It was a perfectly laid trap for a devastating punchline delivered from the perspective of the United Kingdom. The fictional response from across the ocean was chillingly precise, stating that at least the British authorities actually arrest their most powerful predators. That singular sentence sucked the air out of the room because it was anchored in undeniable, terrifying reality. The contrast between the two nations is staggering. Look at the timeline of events unfolding in London. On the 19th of February, a man formerly known as a prince, a member of the most heavily protected royal family on the planet, was formally taken into custody following the unsealing of new, damning documents. Merely 4 days later, on the 23rd of February, another highly influential British figure, a former ambassador to the United States, faced the exact same fate. Two untouchable men, completely stripped of their institutional armor, finally facing the crushing weight of legal accountability. The British system, for all its flaws, moved decisively. Now, direct your attention back to the United States. The exact same cache of unsealed documents detonated across the American media landscape. These files were overflowing with the names of the most powerful politicians, billionaires, and celebrities in the country, explicitly including the current leading candidate and former president. The evidence was public, the associations were undeniable, and the global network of abuse was laid bare for the entire world to read. Yet, the American legal response was absolute, deafening silence. Not a single high-profile American power broker named in that specific context has been placed in handcuffs. The untouchables in America remained entirely untouched. Instead of facing rigorous questioning or displaying even a fraction of humility, the former president embarked on a media tour of staggering audacity. He stood before cameras and boldly proclaimed that the unsealed files proved he was totally exonerated. He then proceeded to make a statement so profoundly bizarre that it defied all political logic. He declared himself to be the foremost expert on the entire horrific situation, simply because he claimed to have survived the scrutiny. Proudly labeling yourself an expert on the inner workings of an international human trafficking syndicate is an incredibly dark and revealing boast. It is not the victorious defense mechanism he believes it to be. Rather, it highlights an uncomfortable proximity to the darkness. The psychological analysis becomes even more disturbing when you examine where he directed his empathy. During his public statements regarding the scandal and the subsequent arrests overseas, he offered his heartfelt condolences. However, those condolences were not directed toward the countless young women whose lives were systematically destroyed. He did not express a single ounce of sorrow for the victims. Instead, he repeatedly expressed how incredibly sad the situation was for the British royal family. He viewed a global tragedy entirely through the lens of elite inconvenience. It is a catastrophic failure of basic human morality when a leader feels more compassion for accused abusers and their embarrassed relatives than he does for the survivors of unimaginable exploitation. But the outrage reaches a fever pitch when the focus shifts from public statements to the actual mechanics of the American justice system. When the federal authorities finally released the highly anticipated files, independent journalists and legal watchdogs immediately noticed something structurally wrong. The narrative was incomplete. Crucial pages were simply gone. Entire records had been meticulously deleted or inexplicably misplaced before reaching the public eye. The most terrifying omission involved a specific interview conducted by federal investigators. The missing documents detailed the harrowing testimony of a young survivor who was merely 13 years old at the time of the alleged events. According to the original reports of this missing file, she told federal agents a story of being trafficked directly to the former president. The details of her account were violently specific, involving physical retaliation after she attempted to defend herself by biting her abuser. The fact that a testimony this explosive, involving a minor and the most famous man in the country, simply vanished from the official federal record is a scandal of monumental proportions. This is the dark, rotting core of the entire narrative that the late-night hosts exposed. It is not just about bad behavior. It is about a systemic cover-up that protects the elite at the expense of the vulnerable. You are forced to look at the undeniable juxtaposition. In Britain, the gavel drops and arrests are made regardless of titles or bloodlines. In America, the accused claims absolute innocence on national television, demands an apology, and the most damning pieces of evidence quietly disappear into a bureaucratic black hole. The laughter in the theater was no longer joyful. It was a collective gasp of disbelief at a justice system that operates with two completely different sets of rules. The cultural divide crystallized perfectly during the biggest sporting event of the year. While the global entertainment community celebrated diversity with multilingual broadcasts reaching billions across continents, a highly vocal political faction staged a massive public tantrum. Driven by xenophobia and a fundamental misunderstanding of American territories, this group organized an entirely separate broadcast because they were furious that a Puerto Rican superstar was chosen to headline the traditional halftime show. They desperately needed a performance that reflected their specific ideological purity. Their chosen musical champion was a man whose primary aesthetic involved screaming at beer cans. The grand alternative to a bilingual international pop star was a performance so heavily manipulated that it immediately fell apart upon broadcast. The chosen rock star was caught blatantly moving his mouth while the pre-recorded vocals played completely out of sequence. The aftermath was a spectacular display of mental gymnastics. Instead of gracefully admitting to utilizing a backing track, the rock artist embarked on a frantic media tour to explain the auditory disaster. He constructed a labyrinthine excuse involving his disc jockey missing cues and the sheer physical difficulty of jumping around the stage like a wild animal. He essentially confessed that the entire event was completely engineered beforehand, while desperately insisting he was actually performing live. It was a perfect microcosm of the political movement itself, a manufactured spectacle demanding absolute belief from its audience even when the technological wires are visibly sparking right in front of their eyes. Even the prominent conservative organizers who engineered this counter-programming mysteriously failed to attend their own creation. The former president himself reportedly spent that exact evening inside his private club, watching the actual sporting event featuring the very same international artist his supporters were boycotting. This bizarre disconnect between public outrage and private reality transitioned seamlessly into another cinematic disaster. The late-night hosts shifted their focus from fake live music to a staggering exercise in marital detachment. A massively expensive documentary project emerged, focused entirely on the former First Lady. This project reportedly carried a budget of $75 million, an astronomical sum financed by a prominent tech billionaire in what appeared to be a blatant attempt to curry political favor. The individual chosen to direct this incredibly expensive vanity piece carried his own heavy baggage, sharing deep and troubling social connections with the very same disgraced financier mocked earlier in the evening. The film itself accidentally delivered a comedic masterpiece of utter apathy. Instead of delivering a powerful portrait of a political partnership, the documentary primarily featured footage of the protagonist trying on various luxury outfits inside the executive mansion. The most devastating moment arrived during a recorded phone call on a night of massive political consequence. While the commander-in-chief frantically discussed the certification of electoral votes, his spouse responded with a tone so flat and profoundly disinterested it bordered on performance art. She openly admitted to skipping his monumental televised address because she was occupied with unspecified meetings, offering hollow congratulations that echoed coldly through the telephone line. It was a brutal and unscripted glimpse into a remarkably transactional relationship. The footage also exposed the crippling persecution complex gnawing at the core of the political leader. During another captured moment, he expressed intense frustration upon discovering that a major collegiate athletic championship was scheduled on the exact same evening as his inaugural celebration. He genuinely believed that hundreds of academic institutions had conspired years in advance to strategically place a football game on the calendar simply to steal his television ratings. He perceived a standard athletic tradition as a deliberate and tactical strike against his personal spotlight. The late-night comedians devoured this footage. They highlighted the profound absurdity of a world leader battling imaginary conspiracies orchestrated by university sports programs, while his own spouse could not muster the energy to watch him on television. The laughter from the audience was fueled by the sheer exhaustion of watching powerful people manufacture their own endless supply of petty grievances. The television broadcast concluded with a profound realization about the current state of modern journalism. Major broadcasting networks are increasingly surrendering to political intimidation. Executives are actively restructuring news divisions, killing critical coverage, and quietly agreeing to massive multi-million-dollar legal settlements just to appease a singular political movement. As traditional news desks capitulate to these aggressive pressure campaigns, late-night comedians are unexpectedly becoming the ultimate barricade protecting the unvarnished truth. They stand on stage, armed only with a microphone, and deliver the brutal honesty that corporate journalists are now completely terrified to broadcast. The former president proved this exact point in real time. Unable to simply ignore the mockery, he spent his evening furiously typing insults about the award show host on his social media platform. He demanded the host be replaced, criticizing his talent and appearance while the entire world watched the broadcast. Instead of ignoring the digital tantrum, the host read the angry message aloud to the massive celebrity audience. He paused, looked directly into the camera, and delivered a devastating final blow, simply asking the former leader if it was not currently past his jail time. The room exploded. It was a perfect, crystalline moment of accountability delivered through comedy. This spectacular collision of politics and entertainment proves exactly why independent voices are more crucial now than ever before. We must continue to expose the absurdity and hold the powerful accountable without corporate filters. What are your personal thoughts on this historic television moment? Drop your detailed opinions down in the comments section below so we can continue this vital conversation. If you value this type of fearless analysis, please consider subscribing to the channel. Share this video across your social networks and send it directly to your friends and family.